I welcome you. I appreciate very much that you are here on this Thursday afternoon, which is always a difficult times. And as you see, many of my colleagues already are back on their way to their home countries. But nevertheless, we always say in my country, in Estonia, that a small company is exactly the best company. So I can congratulate all of you who are here. And I also like to mention in the very beginning that when we started to organize this event for this afternoon, we had quite much broader interest among MEPs like Graham Watson and Heidi Audala, and I'm in the position just to give all their best regards, because as you all know, and I think we can understand and excuse, especially Graham Watson, who has election, his party actually has elections today in Great Britain, and he simply also in his way back to London, and as a liberal also I wish all the best to his party. But friends, I will not be too long myself. I'm very grateful that that we have also for this discussion very good experts who know about Tibet. I would call it Tibet if you allow me. And I appreciate it that you are here because the people in Tibet, we all know that we can't change much, we can't do much ourselves, but the only thing is what we can show, that we are here in Europe in the peaceful environment. We are the people who are caring and not forgetting people in Tibet. We are not forgetting their problems, and we keep up the issue in the agenda, also in the European Parliament, in the informal hearings like this, or also more formal level as in the subcommittee of human rights of this Parliament. So, and having been dealing myself a lot, many years with Russia specifically, then I would say that people in Tibet, like in Russia, they need us. They need our support, and even they know that we can't do much, but they need us, that we are here, we are discussing the issue, and we give them a moral support for their survival. And I'm also coming a totalitarian country, Estonia, and we know the experience. We know how hard it was for the dissidents working and living in this terrible regime. And therefore, all kind of outside support in that time from the Western Europe, from the democratic world, was vitally important. And therefore, exactly this is what we are doing today, also showing our support and care about these people who live there. And now, friends, I will just very shortly introduce our speakers. Mr. Roy Strider from Estonia, who is not only a musician, not only a writer, but also a person who has been many times in the region himself, not only in Tibet, but also in surrounding places, and he will speak up himself about his experience. And I have another friend, member of our national parliament, Mr. Silver Meikar. He was actually a candidate also for the European elections. But perhaps next time he will be a MEP, but also he is well known in Estonia as a human rights fighter, not only in Tibet, but he was the man who took place in Orange Revolution, for example, in Ukraine. He has been many times in the region, also in Tibet, Myanmar, and other very complicated regions. And here I have my colleague from the Greens group, Mr. Raul Romeva y Rueda. And he will be also our speaker after Roy will finish. I'm very, very grateful that you have time. I know you are also under time pressure, as we all are. So we decided to make it very short, have a short discussion, and make a conclusions, if possible, what I, as a member of the Subcommittee of Human Rights, can pick up and take back to the committee. Thank you. And now I give the floor to Roy.
Hello. If we are talking about Tibet today, we are talking surely about China. Exploring Tibet today gives little hope to those dreaming of rewinding the wheel of time. The devastation of China is present in its greatest virtuosity, and Tibet, as it has been known for centuries, is no more. This very same China has mastered the ability to repulse all remarks concerning questions about human rights, just as a professional tennis player has mastered the ability to dismiss curveballs. And this very same China entertained the happy and joyous family of the world at the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008. In reality, it is almost impossible for journalists, lawyers, musicians, educators, and human rights activists to get a visa to visit the all-powerful China. Of course, it's possible if you lie, and it's some kind of perfect start to enter the totalitarian environment of scenic nature, where statistics, news, trademarks, and even food is being falsified. In Tibet, as you know probably, even the internet is censored. Recent success of huge Chinese cyber intelligence in hacking Pentagon servers is accompanied by the Internet Police Agency. As far as I know, all blogs, most virtual reference books, for example, Wikipedia, many newspapers, etc., are all blocked for usage. The official partner of the government, Yahoo, is cooperating with powers in charge rather warmly, giving out cyber dissidents and helping in dismissing sensitive search words. There is no free speech in Tibet. Most basic human rights are being violated. A lot of restrictions are being imposed in the field of religion, something so important in a place like Tibet. And of course, there will be a lot to say about classism. Chinese migrating to Tibet Plateau, beguiled with big government-organized benefits, are preferred to natives in housing affairs, labor market, and in the field of education. Besides this kind of social segregation, the so-called dominating nation syndrome is very common. In both biggest cities of Tibet, Lhasa and Shigatse, many new houses resembling huge concrete boxes have been built, all waiting for migrant Chinese newcomers. The same is apparent in spreading so-called communist capitalism. Many streets host empty shop boxes waiting for Chinese merchants. A big helper of assimilation and migration is the new Qinghai Railway Express, launched a few years ago and increasing the number of migrating Chinese fiercely. In Lhasa and Shigatse, 85% of population are Chinese already. It's a big number, isn't it? And more about human rights. It's very simple. when you talk about Dalai Lama or own a picture of him, you will be put right to jail. To be honest, there is very little left that is allowed when trying to remember what Tibet used to be. One of well-known icons of Tibet, the Potala Palace, has been printed on the 50 yuan bill, an act obviously saying that Tibet is a part of Maoist China in nature, just as the very same Dalai Lama is one of them whenever needed. Over the recent past, the Chinese authorities, under the pretext of security measures, has intensified clampdown on the fundamental human rights of the Tibetan people. Spontaneous pan-Tibet protests since 10th March 2008 are sincere manifestation of brutality and oppression suffered by the Tibetans at the hands of a Maoist party for more than half of a century. This goes in contrast to the authorities' projection of an image of harmonious society and failure of Beijing long-held Tibet policies. Particularly in last years, Tibetans in Tibet Autonomous Region and other neighboring areas have witnessed unprecedented repression and crackdown following massive protests since 10th March 2008 across the Tibetan plateau, which has resulted in the death of more than 200 Tibetans as a direct result of Chinese brutality, and over 7,000 were detained in various places and hundreds injured, with many cases remain unaccounted for due to various circumstances. There are many credible reports of people died from torture and inhuman treatment meted out to them. Just for instance, Nechung, a 38-year-old mother of 4 children from Karuhu village in Gaba County, Sichuan province, died days after being subjected to brutal torture in a Chinese prison on 17th April 2008. In another instance, Dawa, a 31-year-old Tibetan farmer from Dedrong village, Janka Township, Lhasa City, died on 1st April 2008 after being severely beaten by Chinese prison guards. Similarly, 3 monks from Drango County in Garza were brutally crushed by the security forces for staging a peaceful protest in front of county government headquarters. One of them, Tsevang Takpa, a 22-year-old from Changta Township, Drango County, in particular sustained multiple and severe injuries that eyewitness recounted slight chances of his survival. There were even rumors of his death from torture he suffered, and it could not be ascertained even today. And such reports are almost like it happens every day. China still continues to use certain provisions of criminal law as political tools to suppress dissent. The charges of endangering state security, disrupting social order, and the term terrorist organization in China's criminal law are not defined, thereby allowing a broad and ambiguous range of interpretation, including criminalization of non-violent political protests in the politically restive regions like Tibet, and used to prosecute those engaged in legitimate and peaceful human rights activities. China justified its repression of free speech under a broad interpretation of national security. So maybe I should give some sample what mistakes are made usually with dealing Chinese powers. There is very different understanding about political rhetorics in China. Like when the United States Congress, despite heavy protest from China, gave Dalai Lama a golden medallion for his work for world peace, Beijing finally announced, excellent, this guy is basically Chinese. Whereas the Soviet Union, as the old enemy of USA, was slowly but surely weakening, China is increasingly getting stronger. In order to fully understand the situation, the United States leaders should perhaps have been born in a country ruled by a dictator. Without question, Tibet is the biggest trump that could be used against China in the international rhetoric, although it was discarded during the Beijing Olympics. At the beginning of last century, the British used Tibet as a buffer between themselves and the Russians. And similarly, the Western countries may soon use Tibet as a buffer to hinder China by uniting in a front against China on the basis of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Some countries could even make Tibet an important part of their foreign politics. In this case, the motivation would mainly be economical and express the weakness of classical power. China is very much aware of its Achilles heel on the roof of the world and is trying to fix the problem as soon as possible. Should a truly democratic referendum in Tibet take place, the majority of votes would support any of official Beijing views as a result of resettlement of loyal Chinese citizens in the Tibetan autonomous region. USA has used Tibet against China before. Maybe you know the case, maybe not, but from 1956, CIA trained and armed the Tibetan partisans to weaken the Red Empire of Asia. The partisans trained in Colorado in Camp Hale military base even believed that USA would give them a nuclear weapon to fight the Chinese. However, the Operation Shadow Circus was abandoned as soon as there was a change in Washington's political course. By playing the Tibetan card at this point, USA might find allies among the rest of the Western countries whose position is weakened by increasing power of China. While the independence of Tibet was not even considered by the US government half a century ago, the country might now get a real chance. It may as well happen that the Western countries, stunned by the increasing influence of China, will take a unified position concerning the discrimination of ethnic groups like Tibetans or Uyghurs and use that to put pressure on China. In this case, Tibet has an opportunity to get closer to autonomy and basic human rights promoted by the Dalai Lama. What is important to corporations and governments has unfortunately often no use for average people, for whom it rarely matters who owns modern capital. Although Tibetans have so far turned to United Nations and different nations and governments for help, the solution for the problem lies probably elsewhere. I think we, the people, are the key to the solution. The role of the European Parliament should become more communicative, to operate with information in order to inform European citizens about the situation, and in this way ask for a new mandate on the Tibetan issue. When the usual realpolitik does not work, it is the right moment for turning to a values-based approach, and the European Parliament ought to become a pioneer in this field. Nowadays, it is often forgotten who should have a power. The electorate and the politicians have distanced from each other, especially on the Tibet issue. But at the end, I think China cannot beat the people of the world. So also the Tibetans should turn straight to the people, not the governments, so that everybody will demand their politicians to take action in the matter of Tibet. Adding a new competitor in the race for the Tibet would give governments a strong reason to rely more on the political will, on their voters to support Tibet. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive and very compact and short overview. Of course, you could have the lecture for hours for us from your experience, but due to the limited time, as we always have, you made your best really to put it in a very concentrated way. So I would propose that we will listen all the speakers, and then we will pick up the questions and can have a debate after we will hear also my colleague in the European Parliament, Raul Romeva Rueda from the Green Group, who is also a person who has an experience in the field of protection of human rights and basic freedoms, and also in connection with Tibet. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. The question of the Tibet is not new at all, not for me, but not for this House either, because we have been dealing with this for a long time ago, and unfortunately, I'm afraid that we will have to deal with it for a long time still. However, anything we can do, any move we can make, it's crucial, it's important. So even small debates like this one can help, can improve, can participate of the solution of the situation. However, I would just say very, very shortly 2 or 3 comments. The first one, the title is Human Rights in Tibet after the Beijing Olympics. I should remind us that when we discuss about the Olympics Games as one opportunity for improving the human rights situation in China, and not only in China, but basically in China and in the surroundings, many of us were very skeptical about this. And we tried to explain that this was not an opportunity in the sense that they presented. The reality is now showing us that we were right. Unfortunately, we were right. Situation in China has not changed in basics in terms of human rights, not only in China, but also in other parts around, and I'm talking about Tibet mainly. And that's something that we should bear in mind, because in that moment, the justification for the Olympics was that the situation of the human rights would improve. I'm very much pessimistic about this situation, and I'm very much pessimistic about the sense that we missed an opportunity for putting very clear the priorities of the European Union. I'm talking about the fact that in a certain moment it seemed that by the moment the president of the council, that was President Sarkozy, was keen to make a move in denying his presence in the Olympic Games. That finally he did not follow his own intention. But anyway, I am very much concerned about the fact that we might be forgotten the situation right now after the Olympics, and that's something that we should not forget at all. Second thing is that when you visit China, and we had the chance to do it in several occasions, and being part of the official delegations in China, you could have the feeling, the flavor of how the Chinese authorities perceive this situation is very shocking. Although it's not new, but it's very impressive to see how you can talk almost about everything in a very calm way, in a very peaceful way, in a very, let's say, diplomatic way, until you raise the issue of Tibet. Tibet is a very hot issue, is a very sensitive issue for the Chinese authorities and several parts of the party and the government. I would say mainly the party, who is the one who is dealing the country, rather the government is subsidizing the party, but the main people there are in the party. That's important. Why? Because what I understand is that we have to very much stress the importance of the Tibet issue, not to make steps back because it's a hot issue. And that's important also in the sense that we have a huge power now as a European Union that wants to have a relationship with China, which I understand is necessary, is important. Of course, everybody needs to have good relations with everybody. The problem is the basis where you establish for having this relationship. And in the case of China, I think we have to remind constantly that one of the priorities for the European Union to have a good relation with China should be the solution, or at least the putting the situation of the Tibet in the good track. This is important for the third thing I want to mention. One of the surprises you can get from talking with the Chinese on many occasions is the fact that they are trying to convince you about things that you know that they are not true. They are trying to convince you sometimes about the fact that in Tibet there is a kind of nationalistic military groups that are trying to break the relationship with China, and that they are trying to make a kind of a war. And you know that's not true. You know that basically this is not true. Because you know, because we have been talking with many people in Tibet, we have been talking with the Dalai Lama representative, we have been talking with a lot of groups that are simply and legitimately asking for not only the recognition of their people, of the language, of the culture, of the religion, of the way of living, but also asking for a solution that so far seems to be very reasonable, which is at least to restart the Sino-Tibetan dialogue. Is that easy? Is that simple? So to claim for the Chinese to go back to the dialogue is not claiming for the moon. It's claiming for the common sense. It's claiming for a peaceful way to solve a conflict. And you will hardly find a people in a situation like the one who are living in Tibet who are more peacefully asking for a solution. And that's important. And that's important for international communities to support this way of asking for justice. There are many ways for asking for justice, and sometimes these ways are wrongly asking for a justice that actually they are putting in a threat. But in the case of Tibet, I have to say, and it's important to remind, that is the smallest part who is asking to the biggest part a dialogue, which is something that we as European Union simply cannot deny. We have to support it, we have to invite them, and now I'll put a very simple example. When the Dalai Lama is asking to come to Brussels, we have to welcome him. Not because he's religious, not because he's a religious leader, but everybody can have the feeling they have, but because he is the person that the Tibetans recognize as their representation. We have to admit that he is an outspoken He is the representative of a cause. And this cause needs to be listened in the European Parliament. And that's something that it's important to remind, because every time that we have had the opportunity to listen to him, we had problems. We had a lot of problems to have this dialogue going on. Finally, and very concrete, the worst we can do with this situation is the business as usual. You mentioned this, right? I fully agree. I mean, to act as if nothing happens, as if we can simply have a good relation with China, forgetting about the Tibet, because this will have very bad consequences, not in the medium term, in the already short term, for a very simple reason. Because the unity that you might have and you might find still in Tibet can break, and can break in many ways that you cannot control. And that's important, to find a solution right now, to find a solution as soon as possible in order to prevent this, because this will bring more suffering, more poorness, more died people. That's what we're talking about people dying. And this is why I understand that this policy, and I'm signaling especially, for instance, the current Spanish presidency, this way of simply hiding the problem, simply saying that, well, we need to prioritize a good relation with China. We should not embarrass them. We should not put them in a trouble, is, in that principal issue, a mistake. A mistake, because that gives the signal, that gives the light to the Chinese that you can do business as usual, putting Tibetan cause aside. And this is exactly the reason why the situation is not evolving at all. So let's reverse these things. And I insist, let's start by claiming that's one thing that we as Parliament can do. Let's start, well, not start, because we have done this for years already. Let's insist in the necessity of reinstauration, the dialogue, the Sino-Tibetan dialogue. This has to be the priority. And in this frame, we can start thinking about models, proposals, and whatever it's necessary to do. But this obsession coming from the Chinese side, saying that we don't want even to talk with the Tibetans representation, is simply a mistake that we as parliamentarians can simply not accept at all. So in that sense, thank you very much for inviting me. I will have to be very impolite, because in 5 minutes I will have to go back home, and this will impede me to stay for the whole debate. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to once again raise the voice for this cause and for these people. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Romero Irueda. So that's very good that you had time to come here, and I immediately make one remark on what you said as a proposal on dialogue. Yes, of course, dialogue is one way, and I fully accept it. Even yesterday when we had an informal discussion with Mr. Roystrider also, we were thinking about the idea why not the European Parliament delegation should not go to Tibet, for example, to talk to those local people, and at the same time also having the possibility to have a dialogue with the Chinese official government representatives. So thank you very much for your presentation, and then thank you very much for your ideas, but I hope you still have some 5 minutes also to listen to our colleague, Mr. Silvermaker.
Dear friends, I know that you are leaving, and I want to say thank you. In Estonia Parliament, we have a Tibetan support group, and it's... Sorry, I'm not used to these kind of things, but we don't have microphones in Estonia. But the head of our group is from the Green Party, Alexei Lotman, and he sends greetings to you. I know you are a vice chairman of the Green Party in European Parliament. We also, in Estonia, are organizing, we have invited Dalai Lama to visit Estonia next summer, and we really hope that this trip will be possible, but that's a thing that we do with together with the party, different parties, Liberal Party, Green Party, Conservative Party, and so on. I think one of the things that we achieved raising the debate in Estonia about Tibet was that no Estonian authority, top politician, member of government, took part, no authority did take part in the opening ceremony of Olympic Games in Beijing. We don't want to politicize Olympic Games, but the opening ceremony was a political event, and we are very happy that no Estonian politician was officially present there. But I would like to actually raise a very, in some way, pessimistic argument or idea. I'm saying that the fight over Tibet is actually a war, and we are losing it. Expert of military William Lind has a theory of 4 different generations of wars. The first generations started in like this modern first generation started after the Westphal Treaty in 1648. Then the monopoly of wars became monopoly. When the war monopoly became like the monopoly of wars became countries, or countries gained the monopoly of wars. This countries started to actually first time the war was between the different nations and countries. The second generation was led by industrial revolution, and the best example is First World War and the French concept of military. The third generation is a much more mobile troops which are collaborated between each other, and the best example is Nazi Germany in the Second World War. And the fourth generation actually started, I think, in 60s, and it's a generation that actually goes back to the area before Westphal Treaty, where the monopoly, where the states don't have any more the monopoly of war. It means that the small groups and non-state actors actually can are actually organizing the war and are behind the wars, and you can see it. The easiest example is actually terrorist groups. But I also argue that the fight for the human rights in Tibet is a very good example of a fourth generation of war, because when we look at the Lind, William Lind is describing it, it's a fight that you have in media, that's a fight for minds, that's a fight it's a very complex and long-term fight where the moral arguments are important, and when in traditional war you have physical strength that will decide who will win the war, then in fourth generation war the moral argument is crucial. It's in some way it's a paradox, because the strength of moral argument usually doesn't depend who is right, but who shouts louder. And I argue that although Western democracies have actually had much better capabilities, or we have been much better in using these media and moral arguments, but now not anymore. We have to admit that the voices which raise the question of the right of Tibetans are getting softer and softer. And the nice fairy tale about happy people living in harmony under communism communist rule prevails, in political rhetorics at least. I'm not only talking about sending Dalai Lama out from the back door of White House. I'm not only talking about French President Sarkozy regretting that he have ever met him. I think that the Republic of China, People's Republic of China, has become a great economic power, and it's understandable that politicians thinking about real politics have like Western democracies depend on China because of economical reasons. But I'm not only talking about this, I talk also about media, and I talk about social networking. And this is the reason why I argue that we are losing this war. And first example I will make from media. We all know, of course, CCTV, that is spreading the message out all around the world through the broadband cable. We know filtering of internet, hacking the blogs, and so on. I will just give you an example. On the morning of April 14 in Kami province, the devastating earthquake happened. When you will, for sure you remember in 2008 when there was an earthquake in China, when they allowed international aid to enter the country. And I think, if I'm not wrong, the first rescue team actually came from Taiwan. That was a very surprising event. But this time they didn't allow any international aid to enter into the region and said that they can manage the situation themselves. Instead, they sent out nice videos about how their army is helping the people. And but there are some information about what actually happened, and there was a letter from a Tibetan monk which was translated from Tibetan to English, and he described the situation as followed. I will try to read it. When we were working so hard to get close to the bottom of the rubble, the soldiers were just staring at us in a surprised manner. After a while, the media arrived at the spot, and another surprising incident that occurred was that a man, who was said to be the leader of the region, grabbed the shoulder of a monk and rudely said, "Get out of here, get out of here." When we were leaving that location, all the soldiers picked up the digging instruments and ropes and pretending to be rescuing the lives of the people underneath while the media were taking pictures of them. And this is a very good example how you use the media to show that you are doing the right thing. And I would say the second example that I will make about fourth generation war is social networking. My brother is studying in Finland, in Turku University, doing his PhD in microbiology. And during the Tibetan uprising in 2008, he tried to organize an event in this university, but there are also a huge group of Chinese students who actually managed to influence the staff of university that he was not allowed to do it because it would have this political event would have insulted some people who are studying in this university. And it's also using again the social networks and the people outside just to push your message through and actually win this fourth generation war. So I'm very pessimistic about it, but that's it. Thank you.
Well, here we are. The signatures of the autocratic regimes are quite similar worldwide. And exactly what we are hearing and listening today about Tibet can be more or less taken copy-paste, describing to any other similar totalitarian or autocratic regimes. And once again, here we are. Those people living in these regimes, they have less and less hope, as also Silver says, but until the hope is not lost, we must fight for better future and try to make things better from our side as much we are able to do, and assist those people to support them from outside. So, but now the floor is open and everybody is welcome to share your experience, ideas, proposals, or comments or questions, of course. I suppose that both our two speakers who have here still with us, they have been there in the region and know from the first hand what the situation is like. Please, the floor is open. Please, would you like to introduce also yourself, who you are, and ask the question?
Hello, my name is Imke Dubica. I had the doubtful joy to be part of the Olympic team of Germany in 2008 at the Beijing Olympic Games. And I would just like to ask a few questions about the human rights situation in Tibet and to you as an MEP, because I think the road the European Parliament at the moment is taking is a little bit like a obstruct street, because we have a dialogue under the rules of law with China, so there is an exchange in this part, but I'm definitely missing, even in discussions with our teammates from China, with the people in China, a little bit like a cultural dialogue and communication, because the Chinese regime is winning the hearts and the souls of the peoples. Like you said, they're fighting a war on a propaganda channel in television, in the newspapers, and for them it's difficult to accept something like cultural diversity. And there should be more dialogue for cultural diversity, because on the other hand, you just can open the minds and the hearts and the pockets of the Chinese population if you implement the idea that cultural diversity, like in Europe, like in a common Europe, is a possibility to be more successful in an economic sector, that they don't eat up all the energy in fighting cultural diversity, but letting cultural diversity be part of their plan.
Well, thank you very much. I understand this question is mostly for me. First of all, I would agree with you that Tibet hasn't been in the center of political debate here in the European Parliament in comparison perhaps with the other autocratic or totalitarian, I mean China even, in the context of Tibet hasn't been in the center. The only bigger event, if it can be called at least in this way, was the action 2 months ago in the European Parliament when we had this Tibet Day and when we put the flags. Not all members of Parliament did it, but many colleagues did it, put on their tables to show the support from the side of the European Parliament. And actually this debate today here, this hearing today here is, as I said in the beginning, also one of the pushing events also in the subcommittee of human rights to pick up the issue and to take it into our agenda. I must say that we have had a number of different very, very good hearings in the Parliament on several places, about the several places, similar places like Tibet in the Committee of Human Rights. But in my knowledge, we didn't have it yet on Tibet within this almost 1 year. And one of the reasons why we organize this event today here is to take this also to the committee and have a broader hearing. And I must say that also in the European Parliament there is always quite, as my knowledge, having been here just the first year, and my experience is that with the difficult questions, sensitive questions like Tibet is, I'm sorry to say, not so many people are interested in to deal with, and therefore that even more gives the will and wish to do this, because as I said in introduction, so far I've been dealing myself many years with Russia, and in some regions in Russia, specifically Northern Caucasus, for example, in the moment, the situation is very, very difficult, and therefore I would very much support also the idea what our colleague Romero Rueda said, that we should keep the dialogue, because it doesn't mean if we just gather ourselves here and discuss the problem, but we need to involve also the Chinese authorities to talk to them and to put the pressure on the issue. It would be very sad if Tibet will be forgotten. And using this new information technologies, information area, there is a big question, who is a winner and who is a loser in that war? Or as Roy said, that, well, you didn't say so, but we can conclude it in a way that, as I wrote it down, money makes the world go around. If China is investing so heavily, so much in Tibet, but not investing because making their life nicer, but simply investing with a purpose to change the whole picture, the whole nature. And this is really something like a very high wall against we are running, because it's a very, very difficult battlefield and very difficult to fight for. And I guess that many of my colleagues, our colleagues in the European Parliament, we all realize this. So, but please. Yes, there is another question.
Thank you. My name is Vincent Meden. I work for the International Campaign for Tibet in Brussels. It's an NGO, international NGO, and we do lobbying here towards the EU institutions. So I'm very happy for this initiative. Thank you very much to yourself, your party, and for the role of the European Parliament. We do very much agree and reach the same conclusions on the recent developments that happen in Tibet. We are very worried about the situation today, and we think absolutely that the level of repression has increased since 2008, and the mostly peaceful demonstration that took place all over the Tibetan plateau since March the 10th. So we have produced many reports that are on our website. We are going today, perhaps for kind of additional information, tomorrow release a new report for the media on the wave against Tibetan intellectual artists, bloggers, so people that have a kind of role to play in the society and that are known. And today there is a wave of willingness to control this individual. And there is again a well-known Tibetan writer, Shogden, that was arrested on the 24th of April. He wrote a book about the March 2008 events, and he was able to print 10,000 copies and sell them in different regions. I mean, undercover. This is not an official book, not with an official registration. So, and that was a source of concern for the authorities. So we will also tomorrow provide a new list of political prisoners together with this report, an updated list. It's difficult to know how many people are in jail. We reached a conclusion of the number of more than 700 people since 2008 that have been arrested or detained. Some people are released, and you learn it just a few months after, so it's difficult to keep this list updated. I'm not going to make a conference here, but I would say on the EU side, I think the main problem is that there is no there is no EU policy on Tibet. There is no vision, there is no long-term strategy, there is no objective. So the EU is just a reactive body. When something happens, then it will, the maximum it can do is a statement, denouncing an execution, or in bilateral talks, they will raise that or that concern. So today, that's the main difficulty. So there must be a thinking of what kind of objective the EU wants to define and have towards Tibet. I mean, there was an interesting debate in the parliament here on 24th of March this year. It was the first Tibet discussion in plenary, in mini plenary session. One I think bad situation is that just before the talks started, the presidency, Spanish presidency, and the representative of Ashton left the room. They were there for the previous points, but when it came to Tibet, they just left the room. They were afraid to appear in one European institution as listening or responding on Tibet issues. And this is, I think, a bad political signal that is sent towards Beijing. But I think that now the new external service is an opportunity to start this thinking. It's an instrument, it's not an end in itself, but I think Mrs. Ashton should be lobbied by NGOs, but also by the Parliament, and should start to try to coordinate this different divergent national policies that you have on Tibet or human rights issue in China. And I think one of the main objective is indeed to support the dialogue process. The dialogue process is, again, it's not an end in itself. It's a channel of communication and negotiation and the objective of it is to have autonomy, implementation of genuine autonomy in the Republic of China. So the Tibetan officials are not asking for independence, but for genuine autonomy. And I think this is a fair and reasonable ask that we are also supporting. I have written different papers on what the EU could do, and I would be happy to share this with you. One perhaps idea or trip that is to be kept in mind is the President of the Parliament, Mr. Butchek, is going to China by the end of the month for this Shanghai World Exhibition. I think this is a good opportunity for him to start discussing, or not start, but to raise the issue at that level. So these are more comments. Sorry for taking a little bit of your time. Thank you.
And thank you very much for reminding our President's visit to China, and we will make a little note for him from this today's meeting, and also your proposals will be taken on board on his letter, or just a note, as I would call it. So, please. Any more questions to our speakers? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Kristiina. I come from the institution next door, Economic and Social Committee. I would like to ask if you could briefly comment on the resistance of Tibetans in Tibet. Are there any new developments, or is the situation changing? And also, if there is something that could be done outside to support this resistance. Thank you.
Probably this question was for me. So I'll try to answer. The tendency is about shortly young Tibetans are trying to start some so-called real fight against China, and there is lots of rumors about starting some partisan war or something like that, but still most protests are really very peaceful, and I hope they will not start with shooting or something like that. So there is lots of different campaignings, and NGOs are on this field, and lots of information is
Thank you for a very good question. I think Okay, first, I have to admit that I get this kind of information from this kind of people like him. We don't have direct links to Tibet, and the NGOs that actually have direct links provide us with letters, provide us with e-news and so on, and actually they can answer this question. During my last visit to Dharamshala, I met some people who were saying that they would like to see more action, but it's just some people I met. Most of the information comes from these organizations and people, and thank you for that. So maybe you can comment it.
I don't want to hijack the...
It's good. We have a debate.
Okay. Yes, there is a strong spirit of resistance. I think that was surprising when during the 2008 events, everybody was surprised by the level of resistance and protest that came. People thought that it was only Lhasa or the region around Lhasa, but it came mostly from eastern parts of Tibet. And it was, every kind of people. It was young people, old people, monks, lay people. So this gave a kind of new, fresh spirit of resistance. That is very clear. This is one important factor. I mean, also abroad, for Tibetan community living outside the country, it gives also more hope, frustration, but hope also. And this protest gave also a feeling of unity of this all the Tibetan plateau, different regions, because the protest took part mostly in the eastern part where Chinese thought that it was more gained to their, or more integrated in their territory, but it failed to be the case. There is also, as I said, intellectuals and bloggers and writers. So since the 80s and 90s, some young generation of people and singers also contribute to a kind of resistance through art, through songs with images, metaphors, and that is a kind of a resistance also. And poets, there is one very known poet, that is Wozer. She's based in Beijing. She's living in Beijing. She's writing a blog that was often cyber attacked, but it's still active under a Western server. And she's the most known Tibetan poet and resistant, and she's very influential. I mean, if Tibet was free, she would be prime minister, or I don't know. So she's also this kind of person that is participating to the resistance. And I think an important group also is the monk and the nuns. And often the demonstration on 10th of March started with monks from the Drepung monastery. And often when there is resistance, it's started, it pushed by the monks and then followed by the rest of the population. So this is also a strong tendency still today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this information, and I can imagine that you have so many informations, different pieces what you could share with us, and as you offered kindly in your previous statement that you can share that with us. We appreciate it very much. Well, are there any more comments or questions? Well, if not, then once again, I thank you very much, and I must say that the interest in the European Parliament vis-à-vis the autocratic systems is not only just interest, but sometimes perhaps people have some little bit misunderstandings that the European Union is only about the business, that it's only about the business with China and countries like that. Of course, in European Union there are many people, citizens, NGOs, also politicians who care about the freedoms and human rights and democracy principles, and also here in the European Parliament. Therefore, I would like to thank you very much for your comments, for your questions, proposals, and this is also, your participation is also encouraging me, and I believe my colleagues, to continue with the hearings like this, and perhaps in the future we could have also the representatives from Tibet or the well, as Roy said, it's not so easy really get out some people, any big people from Tibet, but we could have these people. Well, government in exile or some representatives, yes, who are here within European countries, whom we could invite and whom we could listen and talk to. So, and the other points what I collected and picked up, I will share this with my colleagues in the Human Rights Committee, with Ms. Haudala, with the chairwoman. Also, that was a good note about Lady Ashton, what you made. And as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, always I can also make myself the questions, put the questions to Vice President and High Representative of Foreign Policy of the European Union, to Lady Ashton, in this respect. And thirdly, as we took a note that our President of the Parliament, Mr. Buzek, is going to visit China, and as I promised, we will make a short note of our today's meeting to him, also reminding some very, very important points what we were raised here today, which were raised here today. So, would you like to say anything for conclusion, Roy?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's very, very important to not give up, to not leave Tibet and Tibetans alone. And I think the key of a solution is inside every separate person, because like I said before, China is very strong and very powerful country, and it's not bad, but it's not good for Tibet right now. But China is not stronger than all the people of the world. So we need some point break, and we must make this point break with mass. So it's important to make a Tibet an issue for ourselves, issue, and just to fight with talking about Tibet, with shopping. I mean, not to buy Chinese goods, and to find some alternative methods to stand for Tibet. So thank you for coming and listening us. Free Tibet.
Thank you once again, and have a good evening. And it's almost in Brussels times, it's almost weekend, so have a nice weekend.